Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Growing Citrus with the UC Cooperative Extension Master Gardener Program. I'm Ann Shellman, the coordinator, and I'm excited to welcome Maxwell Norton, retired UC Cooperative Extension Advisor from the County of Merced, who has been granted emeritus status. And although he retired in 2015, he has still been doing lots of great work. During his time as an advisor, he worked with fruit trees, grapes. He even did work with kiwi fruit, Asian pears, prunes, strawberries, figs, and pomegranates. So he has a lot of great knowledge, and I'm excited to hear what he has to say about citrus. So welcome, Maxwell.
Well, good morning, everybody. And what a beautiful frosty morning this is. We don't really get to experience frosty mornings very often. And so it was kind of a treat to look out on the lawn and see the frost on the lawn. Although we really had to stoke up the wood furnace to heat up the house this morning. Well, California is a great place. We can grow just about anything all over the state of California, and citrus are one of the things that made California famous and put us on the map. Citrus, after the gold rush, the important thing about the gold rush never was the gold. The important thing was the gold rush is that it let the whole world see California. And all these people who had come to California either went back or wrote back home and said, pack up your stuff. We're going to farm in California. I've had enough of North Dakota or Illinois or wherever it is. And it's a wonderful place, and everybody can make a living farming in California. And that caused the next huge migration to California was to come and farm in California. And after the wheat era, we started discovering that we could actually grow citrus, and exotic citrus was pretty exotic back then. And we found out we could grow it really well in various parts of California, from up in the Bay Area down to Southern California. This PowerPoint was originally put together by Tracy Kahn and Tony Siebert. They work at the Citrus Experiment Station at UC Riverside. And I asked them if I could borrow their presentation and adapt it to my use, and they were happy to do so. And so I appreciate their giving me all these slides. So we've, let me see here. Okay. Citrus is kind of funny. There's there must be 50 to 100 varieties of citrus in the world, and you can purchase probably 10 of them in many grocery stores. Most of the commercial citrus are the genus, the subgenus Citrus, and most of these species that we use are what we call the sweet orange, the sour orange, the mandarin, lemons, limes, pomelos, kumquat, and they go on. But all citrus, they all come from three species, three kinds of fruit, as far as they can tell. The pomelo, the mandarin, and the citron. These were the original citrus. And then there's all these natural hybrids in the world, and there's all these intentional hybrids that plant breeders have created. So if you take a pomelo plus a mandarin, you get a sweet orange. Pomelo plus a mandarin will give you the sour oranges. Mandarin plus a citron gives you the rough lemon. Sweet orange plus a pomelo gives you great. This goes on and on and on and on and on. And this has been, and people have been doing this now for a couple of 100 years. And that's why we have such a wonderful diversity of products out there. The UC Riverside has a citrus breeding program. Their newest release is the Tango. It's a seedless mandarin. And there's a lot of importations that have come from outside California. The Citrus Colonial Protection Program, they will search the world for interesting plant material. They'll bring it and they'll test it here, and they'll make sure that it's safe to grow here and doesn't contain any viruses or anything like that. And they recently released the Mary Ellen Sweet Lime and the Zhishan Zetsuma from People's Republic of China. And there's also existing collections in California. The biggest, of course, is the huge citrus germplasm collection at UC Riverside that's jointly operated by UC and USDA. USDA has these big collections of plant materials all over the United States. And for instance, at the Wolfskill Experiment Station near UC Davis, the UC's official collection of figs and official collection of grapes are at that collection there. So how do these things come into being? Sometimes they're spontaneous. You get bud mutation. Somebody will notice a branch that's different on a tree. And the Caracara and navel orange were all, the navel orange is what made California famous. These two, somebody just noticed a tree that looked different or a branch that looked different. And we'll see this on other fruit trees sometimes too. Sometimes you'll get seed mutations where they'll plant, they'll plant, the fruit looks different. And then they'll start planting those seeds out and see if they can get that whatever's different to express itself. And then there's different kinds of breeding programs. Traditional hybridization, where you take the pollen of one tree and pollinate the tree. They can induce mutations. The tango came from that. I don't remember what Nuceller selections or marker assisted selections, but these are all fancy plant breeding techniques that plant breeders have been using for quite a while. You know, the consumers, of course, like seedless fruit, and it used to be almost all citrus was seeded. Now most citrus is seedless, and most grocery stores probably don't want to even carry fruit with seed. Just like it's hard to find an old-fashioned watermelon with seeds in it. I kind of think the watermelons with seeds in it taste better, they have a deeper, richer flavor. And then, of course, people want an easy to peel fruit. They don't want to have to hassle with it for a long time. And of course, everything's got to be sweet. Some people like tangy fruit, but most people just want it to be real sweet. And the perceived sweetness in citrus and other fruit is a function of the sugar acid ratio. The ratio of the amount of sugar in there to the amount of acid. You don't want a sugar acid ratio where the acid is almost zero. You get something that ends up tasting real flat. Like Asian pears have a real high sugar acid ratio, and they don't have much tang to them, so they have kind of a flat taste. And, the industry usually adopts minimum maturity standards, and they don't allow packers to start packing until they get to a certain sugar to acid ratio. And for instance, mandarins, the legal limit is 6.5 to 1. Most of the shippers don't even start shipping until they get to 10 to 1. Of course, you want brightly colored fruit. You want things that look pretty, and then there's also the desire to come up with niche varieties that serve very specialized markets. Different ethnic groups will have special fruit that they historically like, and some packing sheds will try to market to that. So I'm going to talk a few things about botany. If you go through a citrus collection and you look at the leaves real carefully, besides the leaves being different sizes, look at the petiole of the leaf. and the petioles will have little wings on them. And some of the wings are really big, and grapefruit have really big wings, and limes and lemons have little tiny wings, and they're all intermediate. But some are really crazy. Citrus hystrix, so this is a citrus that's used for cooking. They don't eat the fruit, and they like the leaves. Citrus hystrix, like everybody says, wow, look at that leaf. That's really crazy. And well, this part of the leaf is actually not the leaf blade. This is the wing on the petiole, just like this is. And that tiny wing there, and then that wing, and that's a gigantic wing on the petiole. So when plant breeders describe a citrus, besides describing the fruit in detail, they will also describe the leaves. Citrus are interesting fruit in that they have oil glands on the surface of the skin, and normally we don't notice them, but sometimes in some fruit they can be obvious. And on this fruit on the left, you can see the darker oil glands, and then these are obviously kumquats, and so you notice that they have oil glands. And all of you have noticed probably at one time or another, you take the skin of a citrus and you squeeze it real hard, bend it and squeeze it, and you actually sometimes you can get the oil to come out. And citrus oils are used for a wide variety of industrial uses. So in Florida, where they have the huge factories that produce orange juice, they save the skins, and the skins get used for livestock feed and a lot of other food products, and some of them will extract the oils. The oils sometimes can have a real strong aroma, and so they will be used even sometimes for perfumes. Are we going okay? All right. Well, we'll spend some time looking at the different kinds of citrus out there, because it's fun. They don't all grow here in Central California, but it's fun to know that they're out there. And there's a book, I think Sunset Publishers, who publish Sunset Magazine, they even have a book all about citrus, and it's got all these different varieties in it, and you can look them up online too. But the one we're in contact with all the time is sweet orange, Citrus sinensis, and sinensis implies that it came somewhere from China, and we're all familiar with what the fruit looks like. It doesn't have a real thick skin, but in nabels it's a little bit thicker, and different citrus will have different numbers of sections in the fruit when you pull them apart. So Citrus sinensis includes the navel oranges, the Valencia oranges, blood oranges, and the other sweet oranges that you see in the marketplace. So and then in the navels, you can start splitting the navels apart. We don't think of there being any diversity in navels, but you get down in Southern California where they grow these things commercial, they will have different strains of navels. And there's the Atwood navel, the Fisher navel, and Newhall navel, and Thompson improved. And they'll have different degrees of color, and their juices will be slightly different. And then and those are early season ones. And so commercial orange growers, they will try to have some early, middle, mid, and late navels. And that's when those were bred, that's what they were looking for, is a way to spread out their season. And then they have the ones that they call mid-season ones. The Parent Washington is one of the originals, and the Caracara is one of the originals. All of the citrus industry in California all started because of a lady named Mrs. Tibbetts. And she had a garden, and she loved citrus trees. and she read all the horticulture and gardening magazines, and she read a tiny little note in the back of one of these magazines about the USDA collection in Washington, D.C. And they mentioned that they had an orange that doesn't have seeds, and they don't know, not sure where it came from. So she sat down, Mrs. Tibbets sat down, wrote a letter to the curator of the collection, and asked him, could you possibly send me some budwood? Well, he did better than that. He sent her a couple trees, and she planted these 2 trees in her front yard. And over the next few years, she was giving these fruit out, and it caused a sensation because Southern California up to that point was growing Valencias that had seeds in them, and they were shipping them out. Southern California got rich because of 2 things: oil. There's oil fields all over LA County, and citrus. At one time, this is over 100 years ago, Riverside had the highest per capita income of any place in California, and was one of the highest in the country. And all that wealth was coming from citrus. And what made that possible was the railroad. Santa Fe and Southern Pacific, Union Pacific, had connected California up commercially to the rest of the United States. And they quickly realized of all the things that you could stick on a train, one of the best things that tolerates the long ride best are citrus. And citrus started being sold all over the United States. And of course, it made California a very romantic place. So, the California citrus industry is, after that, the different kinds of fresh market fruit started being grown all over California, and they started figuring out how to put them in trains and ship them all over the United States. And the citrus was the beginning of California's shipping fruit industry. Prior to that, it was dried fruit. The queen of the fruit industry was dried fruit, and dried fruit obviously can be shipped a long ways, but nothing fresh had ever been done. Yeah. So those 2, of course, people from all over Riverside started coming over and taking cuttings from the tree and propagating it. And so Mrs. Tibbets' trees, 2 trees gave birth to the whole citrus industry in California. One of the trees was planted in a ceremony with Teddy Roosevelt in the courtyard of the famous Mission Inn in downtown Riverside. The other one was put into a shrine. Here's the shrine. It's got streets. It's one of those little triangular blocks. It's got streets on 2 sides of it and a tall fence. And there's Mrs. Tibbets' tree. Mrs. Tibbets' house got torn down, so they transported the tree there, and there's all kinds of plaques and informative things. And if you get on your hands and knees and look underneath the tree, you'll notice the tree is suspended in the air. The original rootstock has been gone for 100 years, but they planted different rootstocks around it and grafted the rootstocks into the side of the tree. And so the tree has no root system of its own. It's just being held up in the air by all these rootstocks that are growing around it. It's quite a sight. If you do a little homework, if you're ever down in Riverside, as master gardeners, you should make a point to make a pilgrimage to Mrs. Tibbets' tree. And of course, there's the late season ones. When you buy a citrus navel in Home Depot or someplace here in Modesto area, they're not going to tell you what specific variety it is. They're just going to say it's a navel, and it'll probably just be one of the mid-season ones. Yeah, there's some interesting ones. Cutter, McKnight. If you're a real collector, you can go searching these out. There's some of them have a reddish juice. I have one at home, and it's not. It's more like the one in the upper left. It's kind of an orange, a dark orange instead of the real dark ones. There's what they call sour oranges, and sweet oranges to sour oranges are close cousins. The trees look similar, and they're more cold hardy, but they have very volatile oils, which makes them very valuable for oils. And they're used as perfume bases. And so they also will use, if you buy an orange flavored liqueur, they probably use the sour orange as the flavoring agent. And so there's a few of those with interesting names, Chinotto and Buffet de Fleur and Bergamot, which flavors. Yeah, and you know, if you buy Constant Comment tea, it has orange in it, and so and it comes from sour oranges. And the good old Seville is what they traditionally use for marmalade. So there's mandarins, and mandarin orange is probably the proper term. There's a nickname called tangerine because when they were first shipped to the United States over 100 years ago, the port of Tangiers is where they came out of. And so that's where they got their nickname tangerine. But as master gardeners, we are going to use the proper term. The proper term is mandarin orange, Citrus reticula. A very diverse group of fruit. The flesh can be real sweet or even to a real acidity. And they're small to medium size. Well, people love them because they are pretty cold hardy compared to a lemon or a lime or even an orange. And so I grow an old-fashioned satsuma, and I've never seen it get frosted. I didn't bother covering it up last night. They're usually, most of them are usually kind of squatty, and they're pretty easy to peel. If they're fully mature, the middle of the core will be have an airspace in it. And then there's, of course, there's all kinds of hybrids. If you cross them with an orange, you get a tangor. If you cross a tangerine with a grapefruit, you get a tangelo. And so, it's great that you can have so much stuff out there. Now, interesting thing about mandarins, the seediness varies quite a bit. I have an old-fashioned satsuma. It rarely has seeds, but satsumas are supposed to have seeds. Why? Because there's no pollinizer anywhere near, so they're not getting any pollen. The industry has been releasing mandarins that are closely to seedless. And but even so-called seedless mandarins can have some seeds. If you have a lot of pollen available in your neighborhood and there's a lot of insects and they're coming in and pollinizing your tree, you may end up with some seeds. If any of you go to shopping in North Fresno, you know, North Fresno has these huge shopping centers that people like to go to, and also the huge children's hospital just north of Fresno. If you're going down, a lot of people will go down 99. They'll take one of the country roads to Children's Hospital, and then go on into the big river shopping center. You'll notice mandarin orchards along that road, and in the springtime they'll have what looks like a white blanket thrown over them, and it's really it's like a cheesecloth. It's gigantic, piece of cheesecloth that's a quarter-mile long, and they will cover up these trees. And what they're doing is they're trying to keep bees from getting into those trees and pollinating them and creating seeds, because the grocery stores say, if you say this is seedless, then it has to be 100% seedless.
Maxwell, I thought maybe you were gonna mention also the Forestierre underground gardens in Fresno.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, it's the Forestierre underground gardens on Shaw Avenue, right off the Highway 99. An eccentric guy built this underground complex of rooms, and it was a big house, and a lot of these rooms had holes going through the ceiling, and he grew citrus trees down there, and there's a big citrus orchard above it too, on the ground level. But it's a fun place to visit. Go online. They're not open every single day, but especially in the summertime, they're open more often. And
yeah, I just put the information about this place in the chat. It was fascinating.
Yeah.
I encourage everybody to go just to check it out.
Okay, yeah. You see, Riverside has released some mandarins in the last 10 years. Pixie is probably the one that's most famous. And then they also have some mandarin hybrids. There's the Mineola, Tangelo, and the seedless Kishu. And the fun thing about citrus is they have all kinds of shapes. An old-fashioned one is the Murcott Alfort, or the Florida honey, and it's not really the same as the so-called Murcott, which is sold as honey in Florida. So you have two. They have similar names, but they're a little bit different. And they're easy to peel. They ripen in January to March in Southern California, which means probably February to April up here. And like I said, if there aren't a lot of trees around, they'll be mostly seedless. So, I think you may have heard of tangos, and they have very few seeds, pretty juicy, real brightly colored. Now there's the citron, which gets used a lot. You wouldn't eat this like you would a navel orange, but it's a small tree, and they have little spines on them. No wings on the petioles. The rind is really thick, sometimes 2 inches thick, so it's mostly thick. And they're used to make, people will slice these things up and candy them. And so candied fruit isn't eaten very much anymore, but this was one of the things that people used to candy. And the most famous citron, of course, is the one on the top with all the little interesting fingers. And they are, if they can find ones that don't have any damage on them at all, it's used for an important Jewish feast. Okay, lemons. Lemons are they can be damaged easier than sweet oranges and grapefruit and mandarins. They're closely related to citrons, but they're bigger and they're more vigorous. And what makes them stand out is their extremely low sugar acid ratio. 5 to 6% citric acid, versus 1% in the lunches. So. And there's different kinds of lemons. The good old, the one we're most familiar with is the two we're familiar with in Lisbon, and I forget the other one. And there's of course all different kinds of selections. There's even some pink lemons out there, and with variegated skins. And of course, we grow a lot of Myers in our area because the Myers are more frost hardy than the Valencias. But the ones you see in the grocery store usually are Valencia. And limes, okay, and limes, of course, are used for drinks, and yeah, you do a lot of Mexican cooking, you're going to use a lot of limes because that's used. They're called for in the recipe a lot of times. The beer's lime is one of the most common ones out there. They're pretty sensitive to frost. Even the leaves sometimes will have oil glands. Remember that limes are when they're picked green, what the green limes you see in the grocery store, they're not ripe. Somehow we got in the habit of selling limes that are green, and but if you talk to anybody that has a lime in their garden, they will let them get yellow because they have a deeper flavor and have a higher sugar content. And so, and they're high in, nice thing about limes, they're real high in vitamin C. The name limey for British sailors came from the use of limes to avoid scurvy. Scurvy is a physiological disorder in humans when you don't get enough vitamin C. And when people are stuck on a ship for 3 months, they get all kinds of problems associated with not eating fruits and vegetables. And one of them was scurvy. So, and traditionally on British ships, everybody got a glass of rum every night, and they would squeeze lime into the rum as a way to give these guys a little bit of vitamin C. And so limes then became traditional in the British world to use limes for an assortment of drinks. And so if you order a gin and tonic, they will squeeze a lime into it. And that's from the British use of limes. You know, all the sailors came home and they were used to having limes in their rum. They started putting limes in everything else. And so, okay. So yeah, there's two categories of limes. There's the Mexican limes and the beer's limes. And you've heard of the famous key lime and the West Indian limes, and those are the Mexican style. And the other ones from the beer's type, they're the Tahiti, the Persian, and they're more cold hardy. So you probably would around here, if you're going to grow a lime, you grow a beers. I have a friend with a big lime tree, and anytime it's going to be frosty, he lives on real sandy soil. He starts a sprinkler underneath the tree, and sometimes puts a tarp over the top. But this guy picks half a pickup load of limes every year, and he's giving them to all his friends. And he's a member of the Elks Lodge, and so he sends big bags of limes to the bar at the Elks Lodge. So, there are some interesting hybrids, and they're called sweet limes, and they have a higher sugar content. I've never seen them around here. And there's one called a Eustace limequat, and I guess it's because it's hybridized with kumquats. All right. In other countries, sometimes you see pomelos or shaddocks. They have huge leaves. I've seen these in Mexico when I was down there visiting experiment stations, and they have big flowers. Probably you would find them in yards, maybe in San Diego. People would probably grow them for ornamental reasons. Maybe some of you may have heard of pomelos, and once again, they may produce seeds or may not produce seeds, just depending on where they are. And probably the most common is the Chandler pomelo. Chandler was a really important pomologist in the University of California, and he worked for UC, I think, when UC Davis was still just the a farm campus of UC Berkeley. And he wrote some really important books, and there's a walnut, and there's a lot of things named after him. And there's a bunch of hybrids. Cocktails of Mandarin Pomelo, Oro Blanco. Oro Blanco is a cross. You think of Oro Blanco as just being a grapefruit, but it's really a cross. Okay, and that brings us to grapefruit, Citrus paradisea. Pretty big trees. It's hard to keep them small. In most people's yards, a tree is pretty big. I tell people to keep citrus really low so you can do everything from the ground, but it's hard to do that. It's so vigorous. And the grapefruit are interesting. They set their fruit in clusters. That's what kind of botanically really sets them apart. And you know what a grapefruit looks like. And some of them are pretty red on the inside. You have the Rio Red and the Star Ruby. There's quite a few varieties out there. The problem with having a grapefruit tree is it's really hard to give away all the fruit, and you should be a big fan of grapefruit juice.
I'm laughing, Maxwell, because I moved into a house years ago that had a pomelo tree in the backyard, and it was just too much. I couldn't even carry the fruit out to give to people because some of them were 2 or 3 pounds.
Yeah,
It's just too much.
Not very practical.
Mm-mm.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about some calamondin or calamansi. It's Citrus microcarpa. They think it's a hybrid between mandarin and kumquat, and it's pretty attractive as an ornamental because it has variegation in the fruit. There's the papeda. I can't tell you much about it. Citrus hystrix, called the Kiefer line. That's the one with that wild leaf. Really cool leaf. But technically it's not a lime. They call it a Kiefer line, but technically it's not. Yeah. The good old kumquat, the most common one would probably be the Nagami. These trees are grown mostly as ornamentals because the fruit is so fun to use for decoration, and they're a nice tree to have like behind a swimming pool. Citrus are nice to have around swimming pools. They're not real trashy. And kumquats are really cold hardy, so you can stick them in a real cold location and they don't almost never see any damage. What's cool about the kumquat is all the sugar is in the rind and the juice is as sour as a lemon. So you have to eat it like it's a table grape. If you bite into it and suck on it, you'll just get a mouthful of lemon juice. So the way you eat them is you pop them in your mouth and you crunch them up, and the sugar in the rind will mix up with the sour lemony juice in the middle, and it's a wonderful flavor. It's a wonderful flavor if you eat them properly. Some people will grind them up and make marmalade and other things from them. But like I said, and they bear over a long period of time. And you can use them for all kinds of decorations. So they're there a long time. We have Master Gardener, and I went over to her house and I looked, and there was a cool triangular hedge in front of her house, and big triangle. And I thought, that's a nice privet hedge. And I looked at it and I said, there's something wrong with that. And I went and looked, and it was a kumquat tree. It was 3 kumquat trees placed in a triangle. And as soon as those things started growing, she just let them grow into each other, and they just started taking hedge trimmers and start topping it and hedging it into a perfect triangle. And that was the coolest thing. And so that's real edible landscaping. This is kind of off the wall thing. It's an Australian finger lime, and you split them open. You eat the little arls that are inside there. I don't think you can grow these around here at all. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about cultural operations. So now your head should be spinning after that quick jog around the citrus world. And
Yes, and let me ask you a couple questions people asked that were more about the different varieties. There was somebody who asked, well, she said, her name is Nicole. I have a bergamot tincture she must have made from her bergamot tree going that will be a perfume base. She has a bream Tarraco orange. What is the difference between bream Tarraco and Tarraco?
I don't know.
Okay, me either.
I don't know.
All right. Well,
That's a
hopefully
good
Nicole will find the answer.
that's a good internet collection.
Yes.
Go to the I'll give you at the end of the presentation, I'll give you the website for the citrus collection. And if you go to their website, there's probably a place there someplace where you can ask obscure questions. And
Is that the UC Riverside?
yeah, UC Riverside.
I can put that in the chat. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead. Yeah, the other questions are more cultural.
Okay, yeah, let me go through the cultural stuff and then we'll hit the questions. So young citrus, planting citrus trees, like a lot of fruit trees, I don't recommend you stick fertilizer in the planting hole. Sometimes you can give them salt burn. So plant the citrus trees into the native soil. You can put a little bit on the surface. If they have a tendency to want to produce some fruit, only leave 2 or 3 fruit on the tree. We want to get the root system a chance to get growing. And always paint the trunk with some white latex paint. Do that. And even the second and third years, you really want to limit that crop as much as possible. And nice thing about little trees, you can cover them up on really cold nights. You need to watch out the roots. A lot of these trees are on rootstocks. And so you need to be very careful. The rootstock will try to grow, and on a deciduous tree, it's easy to see the rootstock coming up. Sometimes the rootstock will come up a couple feet from the tree, but on citrus, the rootstock goes up the trunk, and it makes it hard to see. And so if you paint the trunk, it'll make it easier. Okay, on mature trees, to get good fruit size and good maturity, citrus trees need full sun. All fruit trees want full sun. If they're in the shade half the day, you're probably going to have to limit the fruit quite a bit because they're just not going to want to sugar up. And try not to crowd them. If it's a full-size tree, you need to make sure they have room. Go easy on the fertilizer. Most citrus do not need a lot of fertilizer. We prune trees, citrus trees, or any evergreen trees in early spring, because we don't want to, if you prune in the fall, you will, or in the summertime, you stimulate a lot of new growth into the fall and winter, and that can get frosted back. When we don't prune trees a lot, citrus trees don't get a lot of pruning. We keep them 12 to 18 inches off the ground. We like good air circulation from underneath. I recommend is you keep citrus trees less than 12 feet tall. And they'll be much easier to manage. And that's why it's very popular to buy citrus trees on dwarfing rootstock, and the rootstock will help to slow the tree down so it doesn't become a giant in your yard. Otherwise, and besides, you end up with more fruit than you could know what to do with. And then when you prune trees, you use thinning cuts. Heading cuts are when you shorten a branch. Thinning cut is when you go to the origin of that branch and you take the entire branch out. So with most fruit trees and most ornamental trees, we always, as gardeners, we emphasize thinning cuts. So if you're trying to lower the height of the tree, don't top it. Look for the 2 or 3 branches that contribute the most to the height of that tree. Stick your head in that tree without poking your eye out, and try to find where that branch started and cut it out at its origin. Keep looking for rootstock suckers for the whole life of the tree. Bare ground under citrus trees is fine. They do fine with bare ground. You don't need to mulch them. Not like redwood trees. Redwood trees, if you have 10 inches of mulch, those redwood trees are going to be happy. Redwood trees hate bare soil. Citrus trees are the opposite. And for the same reason we don't prune in the summer and fall, no nitrogen in the summer and fall. We don't want it to be growing in the wintertime. So if sugar or size is a problem, try thinning the fruit when they're real small, less than a golf ball. When they're real small, try thinning the fruit out. Don't get a lot of pests. Sometimes I see cottony cushiony scale on citrus trees, and oil and an insecticide will usually clean it up really quick. Control the ants. And if you have any kind of scale at all, always control the ants with some kind of ant bait at the base of the tree. And a lot of times if you control the ants, the predators will clean up the pest. Don't use any horticultural oils within a couple months of harvest. So if you're going to do some spraying, just wait till you get most of the fruit off. Now, if the leaves are curling, and we'll see this in the springtime and summertime, a lot of times it's thrips. So you treat those in the springtime with some kind of an insecticide. It's very common to see leaf miners. I'll show you a picture. They're hard to treat. I usually don't recommend anybody bother trying to treat them. They don't look nice, and you can pick the leaves off if you want. Sooty mold is a secondary fungus. It's not primary. Sooty mold is not attacking the tree. It's growing on the excrement from thrips and other insects. So you can look all this stuff up at our IPM website. You being master gardeners, you should already be very familiar with this website, IPM.
Oh, hi, Maxwell. I went ahead and put it in the chat. And actually, we are, this webinar is recorded for the public and master gardeners.
Okay.
So sorry if I didn't make that
all right
more clear at the beginning. So we got lots of folks on here. So I put in the chat the IPM website.
Okay, everybody should go to that website. It's got everything you want to know.
It does.
Yeah. So I think all of you are going to see leaf miner at one time or another. The female comes and lays her egg into the mesophyll of the leaf, and they burrow around in the leaf. And at some point in their life cycle, they leave the leaf. And it would be almost impossible for you to try to time that. Less common is the citrus peel miner. Same thing is happening, different species of insect, but she's laying her eggs right in the surface, and then the peel miner burrows around right there in the surface. These leaves are a real nuisance. They're a nuisance. If you are growing citrus for the grocery store, this peel miner, that's a disaster. That stuff is probably never going to leave the field. It's going to be thrown on the ground. So it can cause commercial farmers millions of dollars. And so they will have entomologists who carefully study and time these pests and try to determine the ideal time to treat it. So rarely will we see spider mites. Not it's very rare. Insecticidal soap is a good choice. But remember, we're really trying to keep, there's a terrible, terrible disease in Florida called HLB, Huang Long Bing disease. And half, Florida calls itself the citrus state, among other things. And probably half of the acres of citrus in Florida have been pulled out because of that disease. They're just gradually losing the battle. And it's spread by the Asian citrusillid. It's a tiny, tiny, tiny little insect. I was traveling through the heart of Florida with a commercial grower there, looking at pomegranate orchards, and this big truck of citrus, and it had screens on the side, and it passes in front of us, and all the fruit was a mixture of green and orange and brown. It was the ugliest fruit. And I said, "Oh, is that going to for cattle feed?" And he turns to me and goes, "Welcome to the world of HLB. That is going to the orange juice plant. That's what our fruit looks like nowadays." And so it's sickening. So, our cautionary tale is don't move fruit or plant material. If you're in LA, do not bring. LA has been bad. They keep having Asian citrusillid pop up down there. Once in a while they have HLB trees turn up positive, and what they're doing is USD goes in and they cut those trees down and burn them. But don't bring anything from Southern California. Don't bring fruit. Don't bring trees. Don't bring anything. When nurseries in Southern California send stuff to Home Depot or Lowe's, they usually make that stuff stay in the truck until the agricultural commissioner can go over to Lowe's, climb in, and they'll inspect all the trees. So don't bring fruit home unless you buy it at the grocery store. All right. The IPM website is a really great place for information. There's a book called Pests of Landscape Trees and Shrubs, and it's a wonderful book. The second edition has a troubleshooting guide on citrus. And for some weird reason, when they came out with a third edition, they took citrus out of the troubleshooting guide. I called the guy up and argued about it, but I don't know. Anyway, but a troubleshooting guide is you look at the symptoms in the book and then gives you possible problems. So if you have one of these around and it's the second or first edition, it has a citrus guide. What I should do is scan that and post it on the internet. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the botany of citrus. Let's talk about the bearing habit. Anytime you talk about fruit trees, you should spend some time talking about the bearing habit. Citrus have perfect flowers or complete flowers, and they are born on shoots that were formed last year. And so a walnut tree, for instance, has separate male and female flowers on the tree. Pistachios have separate male and female trees, but a peach tree and a citrus tree, they have complete flowers. And most of them are self-fruitful. They'll pollinize themselves. Some need pollinizers. Those floral shoots, those tiny little shoots that have the flowers on them, they form in the leaf axils and right at the tip of the shoot apex. So, and if you look at bloom time on a citrus tree, it's interesting. Sometimes they'll have single flowers right on the terminal. sometimes they'll have little shoots with lots of flowers with no leaves. And sometimes they'll have little shoots with lots of leaves with maybe just one to many flowers. So, and that's probably determined by when those buds differentiated the previous year at the microscopic level. So your homework is when the citrus around you are in bloom, go up and take a time to smell the citrus and look at where the flowers are. It's always interesting. So this is what they're talking about. Here's an example where it's almost all flowers and just a one or two leaves on the whole cluster. And it's obvious this color is just going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 or 6. And so you have a flower at the terminal, like they said, and then you have flowers that are forming in the leaf axis, axis, A-X-I-S. So that's what we call the bearing habit of citrus. Bearing habit of peach, for instance, is they bear all their fruit laterally or on the side of 1-year-old shoots. So if you go out to a peach tree in a few weeks, you'll look at the 1-year-old shoots and all the flowers will be on the sides of those shoots. There won't be a single flower on the tip in the axis. With like a lot of fruit trees, most of the flowers and the young fruit are shed before they can mature. The trees will naturally unload what they don't think they can bring to maturity. And in addition to that, we want to intentionally limit the number of fruit the first 3 years. Depending on the species, it can be anywhere from 8 to 16 months between bloom to harvest. So it's quite a range. So let's talk about, we're coming to the end here, and I'll go over the sources of information for you, and then we'll take some more questions. Any of you that went through the Master Gardener program, chapter 17 has an excellent chapter on it. Everything you would want to know about citrus is in chapter everything. If you go to UCANR catalog, UCANR catalog at ucnr.edu, there's 3 good publications that you can download for free. And if you want to know more about citrus varieties for the home gardener, get number 8472. A common problem with citrus is they tend to split every year. And yeah, I need to make a note and add pictures to my PowerPoint.
And I'm putting that in the chat right now so
Right.
folks can get that.
So there's a good publication that talks about splitting in citrus.
That was selected citrus varieties for the home gardener.
Yeah. And then there's one on sooty mold. And if you want, some people want to know about grafting citrus. Citrus are difficult to graft, especially if you're going to top work a tree over to a new variety. But I took a bunch of old grafting publications and scanned them, and I put them on our website. So go to cemerced.ucnr and then go to the gardening section.
And there is publication 8001, budding and grafting citrus and avocados in the home garden, and I'll put that in the chat.
Good. Yeah. And so if you're a real nerd and you want to, there are hundreds more out there in terms of varieties and things like that and hybrids. You can go to the Citrus Variety Collection website, and they have long lists and descriptions. So if you want to follow along what's going on in the industry, there's a blog called Topics and Subtropics, and it's written by farm advisors, and it's written for consultants and farmers. So they won't have anything on gardening, but it's interesting if you want to read some more on it. So any more questions?
Yes, we've got quite a few questions. The very first question we got is how can I fertilize citrus if I am on a steep hill or the citrus trees are on a steep hill?
Well, if you're on a steep hill, you should be trying to mulch to prevent erosion. So what I would do is sprinkle the fertilizer around and then put the mulch on top of it, and the mulch will hold it in place. If you're using drip irrigation, my favorite way of fertilizing is you take a handful. I know that's not very scientific, but you just take a handful of fertilizer. Any NPK fertilizer you can buy, if it's on sale, you can buy citrus fertilizer at the store. Just pick the dripper up, put a handful right underneath the dripper and put the dripper back down. And then the dripper, that water will start to dissolve it and push it into the ground.
Great. All right, we have another question. Actually, there's a couple people who have citrus in pots, and this person is wondering how to ensure the foliage stays really green.
Well, with pots, it's easy to leach out all the nutrients because with any potted plant, you're really worried about salt building up. And so, they say you should water them enough to where the water goes out the bottom and take some of the salts with it. So I guess you need to put a tiny bit, when you water, it'd be good to put a tiny bit of fertilizer in each time so they don't become nutrient deficient. Now, if you are watering too much, and this is true with a lot of plants, you end up getting iron chlorosis. And so the shoots will start to turn yellow. And if the yellowing starts at the tip of the branch and works its way back, that's iron chlorosis. And almost always that means too much water.
Okay, we have another question about someone who has citrus in containers. I'm not entirely sure what she was asking. She was saying, is it true that most fruit falls off in June?
I've never noticed that.
I wonder if she's talking about June drop of the blossoms.
June drop is you're thinking of June drop and spring drop, which is common in stone fruit. I don't know. I've seen citrus lose their fruit all through the summer, even in the wintertime. Usually when the weather changes suddenly, it goes from moderate weather to suddenly hot days. Sometimes they'll drop a few.
And then let's see here. How long can you leave fruit on lemon trees?
I think until the next crop comes on. The best way to store citrus is to leave it on the tree. The quality just gets better over time. Now you get a whole lot of frost, and then they start losing their moisture. But the frost we had last night, it was cold, but it wasn't cold enough to hurt most citrus. So I don't, if they're predicting a whole night of 10 degrees, then maybe it's time to pick the citrus and stick them in boxes in the garage. But I usually just leave it out there, and if it eventually gets frosted, so be it. Yeah, let me mention is I've had people, well, you really can't grow that here because we get frost some years, and I said, yeah, so what? You're not making a living off of it. If I was a commercial citrus grower, it would be a big deal. But so what if you lose the crop every third or fourth year? You got the crop all the rest of the time. So I wouldn't worry about it. Like I said, my buddy, he grows limes in his backyard, gets hundreds of them. Lots of people will grow both Valencia and Meyer lemons, and so.
And we still have quite a few more questions.
Yeah,
Matt,
go ahead.
well. There's a couple questions about harvesting. So how do I know when to harvest fruit on orange, lime, and kumquat trees? I live in USDA zone 9B.
Yeah, I don't know the USDA zones. I just start picking things when they taste good.
I know that's what Ed Perry, our farm advisor here, who is also retired, wrote an article years ago. You just keep testing them
Yeah,
until they taste correct.
that's what farmers do.
Mhm.
They go out and they start testing them, and then if they're getting ready to pick, they'll send some to the packing shed and they'll test the sugar acid ratio. But most farmers can guess the sugar acid ratio just by tasting it.
Great. Somebody also asked, why paint the trunk of a young tree? Maybe she saw a citrus tree with a trunk painted somewhere.
Yeah, and I mentioned that earlier. You should paint the trunks of all young fruit trees. The big reason is it prevents sunburn. And with citrus, the second benefit is that it helps you to spot the root suckers. The trunk will be white and the root suckers, which will be growing right next to the trunk, will be green, and it makes it easy to find them.
Okay, and then here's someone who has a young tangelo tree in Marin County. The fruit appears ripe, but it is much more sour than commercial tangelos. What factors affect the fruit sweetness?
How much sunshine they have, the crop load on the tree, what's the ratio of leaves to the fruit. If you don't have enough leaves per fruit, they don't have enough sugar to go around. And where's he at?
Marin County?
Yeah, that's getting pretty iffy in terms of citrus growing because it's pretty cool there. And so up there, in some years, it's going to be a struggle getting enough growing degree days to ripen citrus.
And here's someone who had a mandarin that was loaded with fruit last year, but this year it only has three fruits on it. What can I do to even out the production?
Well, all fruit trees have a tendency to alternate bear or biennial bear. And sometimes if they have a heavy crop, that's followed by a light crop, followed by a heavy crop. And so if that seems to be the tendency, then when you have a real heavy crop, try thinning some of the fruit off so it doesn't drain the carbohydrate reserves in the tree.
And then we have some people who it seems like they've had their fruit fall off. Let's see here. She was saying her trees are about 3 years old and the lemon and grapefruit have fallen off. I kind of wonder, probably they need to talk to a master gardener about how much water, maybe other things that might be going on.
Yeah, sun temperature changes. If the tree if the tree dries out even temporarily, sometimes the fruit drops off. Sometimes citrus will drop fruit, and I can't figure out why.
Okay. Well, if you don't know.
they're always going to drop something.
Yeah. And then we have quite a few questions about pruning. So some people have here's one person has an overgrown lemon tree. Can I do a combination of cuts to get it back to a manageable size or only thinning cuts? Should I wait or start on it now?
I encourage you to use only thinning cuts.
Just
Because wherever you use a heading cut, you're going to stimulate a whole bunch of growth right at that spot. And with overgrown trees, fruit trees, any kind of fruit tree, we use if it's really overgrown, you're talking more than just a few feet, then we recommend to use the rule of 3. Decide where you want it to be, and then each year you lower it by 1/3.
Great advice. So that would be probably the same answer for this person who is trying to keep her citrus tree to 5 feet tall, but wants to take it down further. And she was asking if she could cut a foot off the top. So the answer is no.
Yeah, don't do that.
Okay. All right. Suggestions for pruning citrus in large pots and just pruning citrus that are in pots in general.
Just prune them to whatever shape you want them to look like. You know, keep some room underneath them a little bit. They don't have to have 18 inches between the pot and the tree. They can be 6 inches or something like that. And then with a potted tree, you can get away with some heading cuts.
Great. Okay. And then we've got a couple, well, here is somebody, so sometimes these questions are hard to answer because you almost need to ask a follow-up question and you can't. My plants are in the ground and are over 10 years old. They stopped blooming and are losing their leaves. So we don't really know where this person lives, what kind of sun their tree has or how much water. So it sounds like they need to contact their local master gardeners.
Yeah, you're gonna have to dig deeper on that one. I don't, could be a lot of things.
And then we do get a lot of questions from people this time of year. Why are my citrus leaves yellow? How can I green them up quickly? What do you say, Maxwell?
Well, first off, make sure they're not make sure that they're not overwatered. You know, with all the rain we had, and if you have a clay soil, that may be iron chlorosis. And then if it's a pot or something like that where things get leached out real easy, then sometimes you do need to apply fertilizer.
I know Ed Perry always mentions that when it's cold, it's pretty normal for the leaves to turn yellow, and it has to do with how nitrogen moves in the soil and in the leaves more slowly.
Yeah, it can be cold feet. The rootstock is functioning at a very low level when it's real cold and wet. And so it's not transporting nutrients very efficiently.
So a lot of times, even if you do nothing, if you just wait, your tree will become green as the weather warms up.
Yeah, especially when the soil warms up.
I've had that with my tree. Okay, and let's see. Some people are asking about a recommended fertilizer, but as at least for the Master Gardener program, we don't recognize or recommend any specific brands.
Yeah, I don't know what to recommend to you because you know, commercial growers will take leaf samples, send them to a laboratory, and an agronomist, consulting agronomist, will then make calculations as to what kind of fertilizer to use, and that's still not an exact process. And so, and I don't think it's worth going through that. If you see some kind of citrus fertilizer on sale, I would buy it and then keep it around for the citrus trees.
Great. And let's see, how often do you recommend repotting citrus that are in large pots? Do I need to replace the soil?
I don't know.
You know, I was speaking to somebody that works for a grower a while ago, so I can dig that information up and send it to this person.
Yeah, yeah, people who work a lot with potted materials have opinions about that. I just don't have an opinion on it.
Okay, and then let's see here. One more question. Someone was asking if there are any good resources with pictures and videos on how to prune citrus.
I'm sure there are. I just don't know of any.
Okay.
I bet
I don't know of any either.
I bet if you just start searching around.
Yeah, look for university sources.
Yeah, if possible.
For sure. And then another question is, this person had a grapefruit tree in a container. The first year it was fine. Then it constantly had yellow and curly leaves. They don't believe it has leaf miner or scale and are wondering what the problem could be. But it sounds like maybe sending a sample or taking a sample of a leaf to the local master gardener, or taking a picture of it might be a good way to go.
Yeah, try to get an actual several samples in a bag to the local master gardener office, wherever that is for you.
Mhm. And then one person asked a really great question. Is there a California or Northern California citrus group on Facebook or other social networks to share info, tips, and progress? And I would say it's probably the California Rare Fruit Growers, right,
Might be.
Maxwell?
That might be.
Yeah, they have a Facebook page. So there's a San Joaquin group. There's different groups that you could check out. They're a nonprofit. And then someone answered our own question, and apparently UC has citrus pruning on their YouTube account. I didn't even know. Might be from long ago.
I'll have to look that up.
Yeah, so we've got a couple more questions, but I think some of these it's best to contact your local master gardener program, tell them all the information that they need to know. How much sun, how much shade, how is it being watered? How often is it being watered? All of the symptoms, give them pictures if you can, and go from there. So
Yes.
Thank you so much, Maxwell. This was really great. It was fascinating learning that the second gold rush in California was due to citrus.
Yeah.
And for those of you who haven't checked out those underground gardens, I highly encourage you to do so, because it's also about the history of citrus farming and really fascinating. So thank you, everyone. This video will be posted to our YouTube channel for viewing later. So have a great rest of your day.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.